The gavel came down at $55. Sold to the Sawdust Man. Dale Rourke said it loud, so the whole gravel lot outside the Hollis County Courthouse could hear him, and most of it laughed, the way a crowd does when someone with a gold watch decides something is funny. Walter Pruitt did not look up. He signed a receipt, folded it once, and put it in his shirt pocket next to a pencil stub worn down to 2 inches. It was Saturday, October 14th, 1972, in Marrow's Bend, Hollis County. The morning had come in gray and hard, 38 degrees. First frost of the year, still white on the courthouse lawn where nobody had walked yet. 41 people stood around the flatbed truck, stamping their feet, waiting for the county to finish selling off what the old rural health clinic had left behind before the wrecking crew came in November. The cabinet stood apart from the rest. Oak, 4 feet tall, 2 feet wide, 14 inches deep, its brass corners gone the color of a bad penny. A nurse's medicine cabinet, the auctioneer had called it, sealed shut for reasons nobody troubled to ask about. Walter had looked at it for 11 minutes before the bidding opened. He was the only one who had. Nobody in 3 counties knew with the way Walter Pruitt did. 71 years old, 5'9", built narrow through the shoulders the way men get when the meat runs off them late in life. His left thumb bent permanent at the first knuckle, a table saw souvenir for 1949, and he carried it curled slightly into his palm without noticing. He wore a canvas coat gone soft and pale at the elbows, and steel-rimmed glasses on a cord around his neck that he only put on to look close at something. His nails were always a little dark, linseed oil and old varnish worked so far into the skin no amount of scrubbing brought it out. He had learned the trade from a man named Otis Farrow, who ran a cabinet shop out behind the feed store from 1938 until his hands quit him in 1961. Walter swept that floor for 2 years before Otis let him touch a plane. A lock is not a wall, Otis used to say, tapping the side of his head. It is a conversation. You just have to be patient enough to listen to what it's saying. Walter had built that into everything he did since. Porch doors, gun cabinets, coffins for people who couldn't afford the funeral homes, and lately, appraising what the county didn't want anymore before it went to the dump. The trade did not pay the way it used to. Furniture came out of a box now, stapled together, meant to last a decade and be thrown out. Men his age had mostly quit or died. He kept at it anyway, 6 days a week, because his hands did not know how to be still, and because somewhere in a piece of old oak there was usually a person who had made it, or used it, or loved it, and Walter figured somebody ought to remember that, even if it was only him. 40 years bent over a bench had left its marks on him beyond the thumb. His shoulders sat a little rounded now, permanent, and in cold weather his knees told him about every one of them before he stood up in the morning. He kept a jar of beeswax and turpentine mix on the shelf by his door that he rubbed into his knuckles most nights. An old trick of Otis's that did not do much, but gave his hand something to do besides ache. He was not a talker. Folks in Marrow's Bend who had known him 50 years still could not have told you much about him beyond what he built, which suited Walter fine. A man's work said what needed saying, Otis used to tell him, and Walter had never found a reason to disagree. Dale Rourke ran the antique shop on Route 9, the one with the painted sign and the Cadillac parked out front, brand new, the color of a robin's egg. 54 years old, heavy through the middle, silver hair combed back and shining with something out of a bottle. He wore a pressed navy blazer to a gravel lot county auction, gold watch catching the gray light every time he lifted his arm to bid on something he had no real use for. He had money because he knew how to sell things, not how to make them, and men like Walter made him uneasy in a way he covered over with volume. He had wanted the cabinet himself, meant to strip it down and sell it as a physician's antique to a decorator from the city, and when Walter's bid beat his by $5, Rourke laughed first, loud, and the crowd followed him into it the way people follow a loud man into most things. A woman near the back, one of the county clerks on her lunch break, said afterward she figured the cabinet was empty anyway, probably had been for years, and nobody thought to argue with her. She was wrong, though nobody would know it for another 3 days. Now, if you have ever seen a man who knew exactly what he was doing get laughed out of a room by a man who did not, subscribe to this channel. Because the people who stay for stories like Walter Pruitt's are exactly who abandoned government buildings discovery was built for. To be fair to Rourke, he was not always wrong about wood, and once, years back, he had given a broke widow $80 more than Hutch was worth, and never told anyone why. But he was wrong about this cabinet, and wrong in front of 40 other people, which was the kind of wrong that stayed with a man in a small town. The Hollis County Rural Health Clinic had gone up in the spring of 1951, a low brick building on the edge of Marrow's Bend, built with federal money meant to bring doctors out to places that didn't have any. For 7 years, it had one doctor, a young man named Emory Lund, who had come down from Ohio in 1948 with nothing but a black bag and a car that overheated on hills. He delivered half the children born in Hollis County between 1948 and 1958. He set bones on kitchen tables when the roads flooded. People still spoke of him carefully, the way you speak of someone who left before anyone understood why. In September of 1958, Dr. Lund left Marrow's Bend without warning, drove west inside of a week, and the clinic limped along on visiting doctors until the county shut it for good in 1974 and rolled everything into the new hospital 40 miles off. Nobody had gone back through the old cabinets. There had never been a reason to. The clinic had been one of 100 like it, built with federal Hilberton money after the war, at a time when half of rural Hollis County still called for a doctor by driving to whatever farmhouse had a working telephone. Men who had come back from Korea in 1953 got their discharge physicals in that building. Women had their children there who would grow up and leave Marrow's Bend entirely, chasing work in cities that did not exist yet in 1951 when the first brick went up. The building had been, for 7 years, the only proof some families ever had that the government remembered they were out there. Walter knew the building. He had built its front desk in 1952, back when Otis still had the use of his hands, and he remembered the smell of the place, iodine, floor wax, and the cold of the linoleum in winter. 14 years was not so long that a man forgot the sound a screen door made. He backed his truck up to the flatbed at noon, and it took him and the county man both to lift the cabinet, 62 pounds of oak and old iron, into the bed. Walter drove it home slow, 11 miles out the Marrow's Bend Road at 28 miles an hour, because the tailgate did not latch right anymore, and he was not a man who trusted things twice. The sky stayed the color of dishwater the whole way. By the time he pulled in his own yard, 3 separate people at the feed store had already heard what Rourke said, and 2 of them had already decided Walter had wasted his money, the way people in a small town decide things before they know them. He carried the cabinet into the workshop alone, setting it down slow to save his back, which had not forgiven him for 60 years of bending over a bench. He shut the shop door against the cold, turned off the radio, he kept low for company, and pulled the bare bulb on its chain until the lights sat square over the workbench. He set a stool close, put his glasses on, and looked at the thing a long while before he touched a tool. The bottom drawer was the trouble. No handle left, just 2 dark holes where one used to be screwed on, and a keyhole beneath it, brass gone black. Walter ran his fingers along the drawer's edge and found what nobody at the auction had found. Small letters scratched into the underside of the top shelf where a hand had reached up in the dark and cut with something sharp. Yell to RM. He sat with it a moment, rubbing the pad of his bent thumb against his palm, the way he did when something was working itself out slow in the back of his mind. He laid his tools out on a folded towel the way he had every night for 40 years. Thin pry bar, bent wire, a jeweler's screwdriver missing its handle, a rag, the tin of oil. He checked each one twice, more out of habit than need. Town talk had already started before he got the truck unloaded. A neighbor had called to ask what Rourke meant by sawdust man, and Walter had said nothing to that, only asked how her mother's hip was doing, and let it go. He tried the drawer first with his hands, flat against the wood, feeling for give. There was none. He tried the thin pry bar next, careful along the seam where old glue had long since failed, and it held anyway, swollen shut by decades of damp county summers. He worked penetrating oil into the lock and along the seam, a few drops at a time, and let it sit 40 minutes while he drank coffee gone lukewarm and listened to the wind pick up outside, working at a loose piece of tin on the roof. When he came back, the wood had softened some, but the lock had not. He tried a second time with the bent wire, feeling for the tumbler the way Otis had shown him 30 years before, patient, listening more than pulling. Something shifted a fraction, then caught again, stubborn, the way an old mechanism will hold onto its last secret longest. He sat back and flexed his hand, the arthritis in both thumbs flaring the way it did once the temperature dropped. And for a moment he considered leaving it until morning, when his hands might answer him better. He did not leave it. He had waited long enough already, and a man 71 years old did not always trust that morning would come the way it used to. He oiled the lock a second time, wiped his glasses on his shirt tail, and pulled the stool in closer under the bare bulb. The third try was the one that mattered. He worked the wire slow, feeling out the tumblers shaped the way a man reads Braille, no wasted motion, no forcing. Somewhere past 10 minutes into it, he felt the pin give a fraction he trusted, and did not chase it. Only held steady, breathing slow, until it settled the rest of the way on its own. At 9:47 that night, something inside gave way with a sound no louder than a knuckle cracking. Not a bang. Barely anything at all. Walter did not reach in. He sat back on the stool and looked at the drawer a moment, the way a man looks at a door somebody finally opened for him after years of asking. Cold air came up out of the gap, and with it a smell he had not expected. Not dust, not mildew, but iodine, faint and sharp, like the clinic itself had been sealed inside that drawer since 1958. Under it, something like cedar, and beneath that, paper gone soft with age. The bulb above him hummed. His back ached from the bending. He put his glasses up higher on his nose, and finally slid the drawer open the rest of the way. The first thing his fingers found was a leather medical bag, cracked and dry, the brass clasp tarnished nearly black. He lifted it out and set it on the bench before touching anything else, the way Otis taught him, one thing at a time, nothing rushed, nothing dropped. Inside the bag were instruments Walter didn't have names for, and folded beneath them, a set of Army discharge papers dated 1946, the name Emory J, Lund typed clean across the top. Next came a stack of letters, maybe 30 of them, tied together with cotton twine gone brittle, none of them stamped, none of them ever mailed. Walter set them down beside the bag and kept going. A nurse's cap, starched once, yellowed now, folded flat. A small ring box, cardboard, soft at the corners, and inside it a thin gold band, plain, the kind a young doctor could afford and not much more. War bonds folded in an envelope, worth $340 if a body cashed them today. Last of all, at the very bottom, a photograph, a young woman in a nurse's uniform, laughing at something outside the frame, squinting a little into the sun. Walter untied the twine with hands that had gone unsteady, not from age this time, and opened the top letter. The handwriting was small and careful, a doctor's hand trained not to waste paper. He read it once through in silence, the wind outside picking up against the shop wall, and then he read it again, slower. The letter explained what Marrow's Bend had never known. Emory Lund's younger brother had come down with tuberculosis at a sanatorium out in Colorado, and in September of 1958 word came that he was dying. Lund left within the week to be with him, meaning to come back for the woman he loved once his brother was settled or buried. He wrote her every letter from a boarding house near the sanatorium, sealed them, and kept them in his old cabinet drawer at the clinic where he still had a key, meaning to mail the whole stack once he had an address to give her. County records, which Walter would find the following week at the courthouse, showed Emory Lund died of pneumonia in February of 1959, 5 months after he left, in a hospital bed 40 miles from his brother. Nobody had known to come collect what he left behind. The clinic simply locked the drawer and moved on, the way places do. One line from the last letter stayed with Walter longest. Fold the letter along its own crease he had written near the bottom, and keep it until I can put the ring on your hand myself. Don't wait past what's reasonable, Ruth. But I hope you do. Walter folded that letter back along its own worn crease, the same one Emory Lund had pressed into it 14 years before, and sat a long while without moving. He thought, without meaning to, of his own wife, gone 11 years now, and the letters he had written her from a troop ship in 1944 that she'd kept in a hat box until the day she died, letters he had never gone back to read again because he had never needed to. He wiped his hands on his trousers, though there was nothing on them to wipe, an old habit from a lifetime of sawdust, and sat listening to the shop settle around him. The tick of the cooling bulb, the wind working at a loose board somewhere behind him, the far-off sound of a dog answering another dog 3 farms over. He sat that way close to 20 minutes, not moving to put anything back, not moving to leave. A man does not rush a thing like that. Otis would have told him, and Walter did not need telling. He picked the ring box up once, turned it over in his palm, and set it back down exactly where it had been. He did not try the ring on the photograph in his mind, did not guess at what Ruth Mabry looked like now, 40 years old and unmarried in a county where most women were not. That was not his to guess at. His part was small, and he knew it, and had never wanted it to be otherwise. He did not know how long he sat there in truth. Long enough that the coffee beside him had gone fully cold, and the frost outside had started climbing the window pane again, and the bulb overhead had begun to hum the way old wiring does when a house gets tired. Walter drove the letters, the ring, and the bonds into town himself the next morning, no ceremony, and turned them over to the county clerk along with a note asking that Ruth Mabry be found if she was findable. It took the clerk 4 days. Ruth had never left Hollis County. She had trained as a nurse after 1958 and worked the front desk at the new hospital 40 miles off, the same hospital that had swallowed up the old clinic's records, and she had never married. She read the letters standing in the clerk's office, in her nursing whites, 40 years old, her hair going gray early at the temples. She read the last one twice, folded it along the crease Emory Lund had made and Walter had kept, and asked to sit down. Dale Rourke heard about it 2 days later from a man at the feed store, and by the following spring word had gotten around Hollis County well enough that nobody brought their good pieces to his shop anymore, not the way they used to. He sold the Cadillac that June. He did not say much about it either way. The cabinet itself went to the new county museum the following year, drawer open, letters displayed behind glass beside the photograph of the young nurse laughing into the sun. A small brass plate beneath it lists only a date and a name, nothing more, which is how Ruth Mabry wanted it. Children touch the oak sometimes on school trips and ask what it is, and the docent tells them it belonged to a doctor once, and a woman waited on what was inside it a long time without knowing. Most of them do not understand the answer. A few of them, years later, will. Walter went back to his shop the same afternoon. He delivered the letters. He had a porch door waiting on new hinges, and it did not build itself. A letter does not die when it goes undelivered. He told the boy who swept his floor now, the way Otis once told him something similar about locks. It waits. He would not take a reward when the county offered one, said the work paid him plenty already, and he had never been offered one and would have been embarrassed by either. So here's the question worth sitting with. A loud man laughed at $55 in a cold gravel lot, and a quiet man said nothing and opened a door that had been shut for 14 years. What would you have done in that lot that morning? Laughed along or looked closer? And what is still sitting in a drawer somewhere near you, waiting on somebody patient enough to listen for it?